Some soap. Okay, what I have here is lye, and I'm down to, I'm right around 142 now. I was over 200 degrees a little bit ago, and so we're waiting for this to come down, right at about 105, and then I actually need both of these to be at the same temp, and so I've taken this off the heat just so the temp can start to come down slowly on my oils. I already have everything mixed in here together, and I had already done some of that prep work earlier where I had used the scale, measured my 3 oils, and had put it all together. And I'll explain the process as I go and kind of explain to you guys how I do it, why I do it, and all that fun stuff. So I'll be right back. We have to just let temperatures come down a little bit before we can continue. So, because we're obviously not close to being 105 equally, but I am down to 140, so we definitely had to take the oil off of the heat, and then that way the temp can start coming down on it as well. And it'll go a little quicker as we go. I'll be right back though, and I'll explain everything as I go. The other thing I have done is I've laid out all of my soap molds. I like to spray my molds lightly with cooking spray. It just helps you bring the soap out. So we're going to go ahead and spray these molds while we wait. So I'll be right back. Okay, I got to 110 as far as the temperature on both my oil and my lye. So let's mix. We're going to talk about trace here in a minute, and I'll show you what I'm after. I'm after more like a pudding texture. So I'll be right back. Okay, so if you've never made cold processed soap before, we got to get to a point what we call trace. And trace only means that it gets to a certain texture consistency. Do you see how when I lift this, and I'll go in a little closer for you. Do you see how the peaks kind of sit, how if I lift this, I can kind of make it sit on top of the pile? That is what trace is called. It's kind of a pudding consistency, like a thick pudding, and instead of being thin and soupy, it gets thicker, and then it just kind of will sit on top of the pile. So when you hear someone talk about trace, that's what they're after. And let me go ahead and do this real quick for you. See? That is trace. Okay, let's fill some molds now that we have everything laid out. And then while I'm doing this, I'll kind of explain, you know what, and I'll move some of this down, and I'll come down here and I'll start. So I have my consistency here. And somebody may have a better way to do this. I don't. So this is how I do it. I pretty much have a perfect scoop. I'm using a 1/2 cup scoop. I can give you my recipe too here in a moment. We just have to go ahead and work quickly because now that we have this to the consistency that it is, it will start to set up more. And and at that point, we won't get it into the mold enough, and then it'll just be a hot mess. The stuff stuff that you use for the lye, you need to mark that, and that only is that 2-quart pitcher that I stir my lye mix into is the only thing that pitcher ever gets used for. It never, ever, ever gets used for anything else. It is contaminated. I have certain spoons that are marked lye. I just have a little L on them. That, when I'm mixing all my stuff, is the only thing that that spoon gets used for, is the lye. And then I have a white thermometer, and the only thing I use that thermometer for is, you guessed it, the lye. The other thing too is, if you get the lye on you, the lye and water mixture, it burns, it hurts. So I don't suggest doing this with small children. Once you get to this point and you know the temperature's okay and it's not going to burn their skin, they could probably help a little. I just have never had, my grandkids are 13 and 14, the granddaughters are, and they've just never helped. Usually Ed's home. But I had all this stuff already. We made soap a while back, and I had one more batch measured out. I had all my oils laid out, and then we got busy, and I just never got back to, and all my molds were full. So what I ended up doing was just setting that off to the side, and I'm spring cleaning. All of that stuff has been sitting in my kitchen in a pile. And so now it's like, okay, we got to get this mess picked up. I like to bounce it just to make sure all the air's out. Because there's nothing worse than not having all the air out and finding it's a hot mess. So let me fill all these and we'll be right back. Okay. So here's what I have. This is what we call 3-oil soap. Let me grab my recipe and turn off that water, and that way you guys will just know what I do. Hang on. I will tell you, by the time I got started with this one and this one, it got really thick really fast. I actually like having Ed help because he's scooping and putting it into the molds, and then one of us is kind of straightening it out and flattening it out. And it really started to get thick on this mold by the time I got to that step. So I do really like having the extra help. Toward the end, I use, if I can get it back out of the sink, I use this handy dandy thing here and scrape across the top, and that's how I do mine. So this is a 75-ounce batch of soap. Now, disclaimer, I use palm oil. This video is not to talk about sustainability or what you like and what you don't like. I like this soap, so I make this soap. And we don't have to talk about what your thought is on any of these oils. You're welcome to tell me what you like to use for soap, and maybe I'll use your ingredients or your recipe. But I don't want to get into, some people don't believe in palm oil, some people do, and some people get rather gruff or mean or nasty and rude when you start talking about ingredients I don't use all the colorants. I don't play with fragrance. I don't do anything. I just make what I call 3-oil soap. And that is because we do have sensitive skin, and this does work for our skin. 75-ounce batch. I use coconut, 12.75 ounces. Palm oil, 15.3 ounces. Olive oil, 22.95 ounces. Lye, 7.171 ounces. And water, 16.83 ounces. I do use a kitchen scale to measure everything out. And if you're not sure what you want to do, there are so many calculators out there that will help figure out how big a batch of soap you want. These molds are a little bigger, so that whole container that I had showed you earlier only fit into these molds. This is what I received on that. I don't like to double it because it does start getting thick really quick. Like I said, by the time I got to this one, it was setting up hard fast. And it just makes it so much harder to get it into the mold and not worry about getting bubbles and things like that. But that is my recipe. I do want to show you one little thing that I did to my hand mixer, my blender, my little hand blender, which helps me with bubbles in my soap. I have not taken the time to clean this up, so my apologies. Do you see the little hole right there in my little mixer, my little hand blender? On the opposite side, there is another one. Ed took a small drill bit and put those holes in my hand blender, and I stopped getting a lot of air bubbles in my soap molds. When I went to take it out, I just found that it does take all the all the air bubbles out, and I'll look for another bar that's before he cut the hole, before he put the holes in here. I'll look for a bar in my stash of soap, and I'll show you the difference, maybe on a different video, because I don't want this video to get too long. But we did put small holes. Now, when you're hand mixing this like you've seen me doing, and then I take my big pot and I tap it real hard on the counter, literally pop it, and that will help air bubbles come out before you start putting it into your soap molds. And I didn't show you that part, but I have the holes in here, and then I literally pick my big pot up and I pop it on the countertop really hard, and that helps make sure all the air bubbles are out of your soap before you start putting the soap into the molds. Okay guys, I am going to wrap this up. There is my recipe and how I do cold processed soap. I'm going to clean this mess up because I made a mess. And then that way I can pick up all my stuff in the floor over here and it doesn't have to stay. And I've got a little bit of soap on me from when I was taking it out with my scoop and putting it into the molds, I got a little bit of soap on my shirt. So I'm going to go ahead, go change, clean up my mess, and get back to watching my show on Hulu. I will talk to you guys later. Hit like, hit subscribe, and more videos coming actually today and tomorrow. So take care, guys. Bye.